In Serbia, there is a saying, a dog that bites hard is of a vampire, but the one that won't bark at night is of the devil. The word vampire is the only word from our language that was adopted worldwide. But what is a vampire? A vampir, as we call it here. How far do the records of this mythical creature go? What is the relation of a vampire to a werewolf? And most importantly, is Strahd of Serbian descent?
Rasti, rasti, moj zeleni bore.
Vukodlak, meaning a man covered in wolf's hair, also known as vampir, is a term for a man into whom 40 days after death an evil spirit settles and resurrects him. He then goes around town suffocating people and drinking their blood. This is the definition of the word from the earliest dictionary of modern literary Serbian. I did say that the word vampire originates from our language, but I don't mean just Serbian. The myths I will be talking about in this video originate from all of the southern Slavic countries. Our cultures and language are very similar, and we'll go from Bosnia and Croatia all the way to Montenegro and Serbia. And sure, we have a unified idea of what a vampire is and how it looks like now, but it wasn't always like that, and in some parts of Serbia, it still isn't. In 1737, on an island of Lastovo, Croatia, a local claimed that those who have evil tendencies and sleep with their spouse too often during their life become a vampire and prey on children. Another claim from 1865 claims that vampires are just husks of skin filled with devils. They exit their grave after 3 days, but can't live over 40 days. 40 days is a very common motive here, and if someone becomes a vampire before that time, it is believed that they are a foreigner. In Herzegovina, they say that evil people that never felt regret for their evil acts rise up from the grave wearing their cover and a lot of scraps of metal that rattle when they walk. They go around roaring like beasts, behaving like crazed horses, again, strangling people and drinking their blood. So far, I've been using the word vampire and vukodlak or werewolf interchangeably. So could it be that the werewolf and the vampire are actually two sides of the same coin, forged from the same steel and at the same time? Did we ever stop to ask, why do the vampires always fight werewolves in pop culture? Even though the word for a vampire originates from the Balkans, South Slavs do not. It's believed that we migrated to the Balkans around the 6th century, between 6th and 8th century actually, and with us we brought the legends of Vukodlak, a local word that used to mean a vampire, and it now roughly translates to werewolf. It was a legend so powerful that it spread all over the region, and to nations like Greece, where it was known as Brikolakas. Though in later folklore, vampires were more tied to animistic beliefs, where only souls of the dead men leave the grave and shapeshift into animals or humans or even objects. But Vukodlaks weren't always considered bad. Long before Christianity arrived, South Slavs were polytheistic people, and one of our main gods, Dashbog, had the form of a wolf, or was followed by a wolf. So raising from the dead in the form of a wolf was not only considered natural phenomena, it was considered an honor. The ties between turning into a wolf and cheating death were deeply rooted in our culture. Even later, people gave the name Vuk or wolf to kids so they don't die young. Even here on this beautiful mountain that we're now, the host of our apartment gave us parts of wolf pelt to protect women from bad luck. But this belief might go even further back in history. The details of my research get a little fuzzy here, but all this animism and wolf talk originate way before any of the stories I'm about to tell, from a tribe called Nervi. I'm not entirely sure what the translation of this name would be. It could be referencing the Ukrainian-Russian tribes of Neuri or Navari. The point is that this tribe thought that their people can turn into wolves once a year, and I think this belief is the basis of today's werewolves and the basis of beliefs that are still strong in some parts of Serbia. Friedrich Solomon Krauss had the opinion that the vampire and the werewolf are two distinct entities. His theory is that they've either been the same entity from the beginning and then divided at some point, or they were two distinct entities to begin with. Still, if they were one and the same, this point of division might be much closer to modern times than we think. One tale from Sokobanja is the first I found that references a Vukodlak as a vampire, a woman unknowingly married to a vampire. They were farming some crops and got thirsty. The man went to get water and the woman stayed. He told her to be careful as the big dog will come and attack her while he's away. And as soon as he ventured into the woods, a huge dog appeared. It attacked her but only bit off a part of her dress and ran away. Later the man returned, and as she told him the story, he smiled and a piece of fabric was stuck in his teeth. Older women told her that she married a vampire, and they advised her to put a needle in his bed. She did as instructed, and as soon as he laid down, his skin was pierced and he turned into meat jelly. Even today in some of these regions, people still say furry as a vampire for someone who has a lot of body hair. So how did the word Vukodlak morph into vampir? One theory goes like this. In Montenegro or Bosnia, the old word for a vampire was lampir, which is tied to the word leptir, which means a butterfly. And the butterfly is a well-known incarnation of the soul from the oldest times. If you kill a vampire and the butterfly comes out and flies around, it must be torched, or the vampire lives on. But the vampire is not strictly tied to a butterfly. In some regions, it is treated like a ghost or a spirit that can possess any animal and escape the coffin through the smallest of holes. But this butterfly form is what is thought to have been the basis for the vampire's bat form that we know today. It is a very widespread misconception in Serbia that our first vampire was Sava Savanović, who appeared somewhere around 1850s to 1950s, but this is actually wrong. Sava Savanović was a fictional character from Milovan Glišic's story that was popularized by a movie called Leptirica, a feminine word for a butterfly in Serbian. There are also other claims of Serbia's first vampire, and one of them is Petar Blagojević, who was the first vampire documented by the Austrian monarchy around 1718. Historical documents referencing the Vukodlak go as far back that we had an entry in Tsar Dušan's law around 1350s that proclaims that vampires shall not be investigated, but slain. Any investigation is strictly forbidden. And the first modern documents referencing the vampire problem were found in Pashman in 1403. A woman was terrorizing the whole island and the city ordered for her to be staked through the heart. So how does a vampire really look? Well, there is a wide range of beliefs. Vampire takes all sorts of forms, from looking like men that go around pulling scrap metal and making noise, all the way to taking a form of an animal or an object. In some parts, it is even believed that they are indistinguishable from normal people, but have metal teeth. In other places like Srem, a vampire has a yellow face, red eyes, blue lips, and teeth black as coal. There are claims that the vampire looks like a horse with a bell around his neck that always rings. There are some even more esoteric beliefs that claim that vampires look like balls of fire, and some think they just look like cats. But maybe the most common belief is that they're just skins filled with blood, so they become red in their face, and as they are drinking more and more blood, they become bloated like balloons. But why would a being like this even come to existence and harass the poor people? And who are these unfortunate souls that take this wretched form? Well, anyone can become a vampire. Some think only people that are not baptized can become vampires. Others say that only evil men, lustful or spiteful men that died evil without regret will turn into vampires. Which, I mean, seems reasonable. An outcast is an outcast, dead or alive, but it's not always that simple. There is a ton of stories all over the region where it is believed that if a cat walks over a dead man or their grave, a vampire will emerge. It was very common then for people around Serbia to capture their cat into a cage while they have a dead man in the house, before the man was buried, in the before times, before we had morgues and burial services. It is also believed that some can become a vampire even in life, that evil men are not evil inherently, but have been possessed and will rise when they die if they are not staked. There are claims by some locals that a man is marked at birth, but not everyone can see this mark. After this man dies, he will become a vampire. On the other hand, there are beliefs that being a vampire is tied to a place where you're buried. Some places guarantee a person buried there will become a vampire. On the other hand, there are places that are believed to be holy and completely vampire-free. So, overall, it's usually tied to religion, misbehavior, devils, or just pure chance. So, what do vampires do when they exit their grave? Do they return to sleep in them? Well, mostly yes. There are even multiple reports that vampires even smoke pipes in their coffins during the day while waiting for the night. Or at least the more sophisticated kind of vampires do. Vampires are claimed to sometimes continue their normal lives and go to another country for work. They have been documented having meeting places, but the same group of vampires is never seen together twice. Sometimes they're even described as passive, more akin to ghosts. They would just be standing in the corner observing their families without saying a word. In Bosnia, there are beliefs that a vampire must come home after 7 days of being outside the grave. And in his human form, he will ask his wife, "Honey, what will I have for dinner?" And she must tell him to go somewhere. "Go to the river," she would say, and he would. He would go there and catch fish until he dies. If she says go to the forest, he will go to the forest and hunt animals until he dies. If the wife doesn't say anything, the vampire would just go outside the house and start hunting people. And if the vampire sees someone sleeping outside, he would pull them by their big toe and grapple them. The victim must then sneeze, and if there is a passerby who sees this, that passerby must yell, "Bless you." At this point, the vampire will just melt. I wonder what would happen if the wife tells the vampire to go to another village. We mentioned the cape, or pokrov as we call it, a couple of times already. It is the fabric that the deceased are covered with in the coffin. There is all too many sightings and stories that claim that the vampire never moves without its cape. Even in pop culture and D&D, you will always see that the vampire has some sort of cape around them. This cape is thought to give the vampire its power. Vampires can't usually be killed in a straightforward way. They are stronger than any human and they don't feel pain, so they must have their kryptonite. And removing their cape is believed to be just that. There is a very interesting story I will try to find the original source of, but it goes something like this. A boy is sent by the village to a mill, and the boy was supposed to hide in the mill, wait for the vampire to come and leave its cape hanging. And while the vampire is not looking, just steal the cape. This is what happened, and as the boy stole the cape, the vampire just sat down and started to cry. And the boy was shocked, like, why is the vampire crying? The vampire was just, well, if I don't have my cape, I'm probably going to die. And that's what happened. A lot of angry villagers came at night and they beat the vampire with sticks to death. Vampires are also notoriously hard to see if they don't want to be seen. They usually come out only at night or in the winter. In some stories, sightings are believed just to happen on a certain day, like Saturday in Leskovac. Others believe that they can only be seen on a certain holiday, for example, at dawn on Spasovdan, 40 days after Easter usually. One very interesting method of seeing an invisible vampire is that you take a mirror and go to a graveyard in the morning, you put it next to a cross, and in it you will see a vampire. Today we think vampires have no reflection, but these are the first mentions of a vampire and a mirror in the same story. So, if they are so hard to spot, how do the locals find out who it is? How do they know which grave it calls home? I mean, the easiest way is to check if the grave looks recently dug, if the cross is not standing straight, or if there are cracks on the gravestone. In Herzegovina, if they want to check, they take ashes and scatter them around the graveyard. The next morning they come to check if there are footprints in the ashes. But wouldn't the vampire notice that? Well, depending on the region, vampires are just animals, just walking skins. Yeah, skinwalkers that are filled with demons. On the other hand, in Homol they find a black rooster and they take it to the graveyard. In the morning they come to see on which of the graves the bird slept. This marks the vampire's grave. And of course, sometimes just reading the right holy text can make the grave shake, and this is how you find the vampire in Chitop. Other times, an adult male horse is led by the rope and forced to go over the graves. The grave which it won't walk over is the one with the vukodlak inside. Now that you found your vampire, you should know how to kill it. And yes, they range from very fragile to almost indestructible, depending on the regional beliefs. In one very old folk tale, a handsome man was roaming around the village every night at the same time, claiming he is from another village. Older women told the young ones to attach a string to its back and see where it leads in the morning. It led to a grave, so the old ones told them to playfully poke him with a needle. They did, and as they did, he turned into meat jelly, as they usually do. They don't seem to notice pain, so there is a lot of stories where sharp objects were left on the floor or in the bed for the vampire to walk over and pierce the layer of skin holding it together. And in some parts of Serbia, people still take precautions against vampires. A person close to me once told me how their father put a needle into the heel of his deceased grandma some 15 years ago, just to be sure. Fun fact, there was a vampire killer or hunter profession as well. It was very popular around 1700s to 1800s. They were employed both by the people and the government alike. They used to have this type of grass that they would put underneath their tongues to be able to see vampires. You can see how this might have been, problematic. And it was believed that they were the only ones who could shoot the vampire from a gun and actually kill it. Variations on these stories claim that only steel bullets can kill the vampire. Lead can't, and silver is not really even mentioned in these stories. In the Leskovac region, there were talks of a vampire child, born of a normal woman and a vampire dad. It could see, talk, and kill a vampire. This is another motif that is very common. The child of a vampire can see it regardless of the form the vampire takes, and it can always kill it. Some say that only the child can kill its vampire dad, and these children have no shadow. Sometimes it's just the youngest child of the vampire that has these traits. Sometimes vampires can only be killed by burning them in a big fire. Optionally, you can just cook their hearts. That works too, I guess. But by far the most commonly documented way to kill a vampire is a white thorn stake through the heart. This plant is usually believed to fend off evil spirits and animals, not just vampires. Babies get a piece of this wood to protect them. Sometimes people use it as a necklace or have it torn in the hat or hair. In rare occasions, the vampire doesn't even have to be staked. Beating it with a holy stick is enough to liquefy it sometimes. Okay, now after learning so much about vampires, we can answer the question that is on everyone's mind. Is Strahd a Serb? Well, no, probably not. That was just a hook to get your attention. Or was it? Let's look at Strahd's full name, Strahd von Zarović. Just looking at the spelling, Strah equals strah, which means fear in Serbian. Von is probably there just to make it sound fancy, and Zarović sounds very much like Zarović, a known Serbian last name. Although, if we want to be technical, the original pronunciation Zarović probably sounds more Eastern Slavic, like Belarus. I think their last names commonly end in ch or ch. Still, in the proper and stereotypical Serbian fashion, I'm going to claim that Strahd is a Serbian figure, before the Croats do. Oh, god damn it. And of course, he should probably have some Romanian roots, Dracula and all that. This is just an opinion, but I think that Serbian vampire obsession was Dracula's rise to fame as a vampire. We Serbs and Romanians had a common enemy at the time, the Ottoman Empire, and we did our best to strike fear into them. And when weapons wouldn't do, we resorted to stories.
Zaspo, Janko, pod jablanom, mile moje drage, lepe moje crne oči, pogledajte na me.
I really hope you found these stories inspirational. In the description you will find a couple of free NPCs that are inspired by these real-life vampire stories. There will be no stat blocks, just backstories, motivations, and behaviors. Big thank you to our incredible host here at the Eagle's Nest Barn, where we are filming this video right now. It is in the mountain of Golia, and if you're visiting Serbia, I really recommend you come and check it out. The food is wonderful, the nature is as you've seen throughout this video, incredible. And you will hear a couple of fun stories for sure. So there you go. Now go outside and pick a bucket of those tasty glowy mushrooms that grow near that creek that can only be seen at night. But be careful, you never know who or what is watching behind the trees. And with that, I bid you farewell, keepers.